Welcome to episode 127 of the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm Aaron Breitman, coming to you late Thursday evening, August 3rd, first day of training camp for Rutgers football. Wanted to get some articles out on training camp the first day and some things that Schiano said to the media after practice. So you can check out the scarletfaithful.com for those articles. But I wanted to, for this podcast, interpret things that Schiano said, right? I think that obviously coach speak is pretty prevalent this time of year, especially with Schiano. It's kind of a master class at coach speak, but I do think that following him over the years and seeing him in press conferences, there's a certain way to interpret things that he says. And I thought overall his energy level was good. I think he is generally excited going into this season, but I think that he was pretty honest. And I think that it kind of tells a story about where we think this team is. So let's dive into it. He did start by saying it was the strongest team he's ever had at Rutgers, meaning physically. Jay Butler's a really good strength coach. It's a really go hand in hand in terms of Schiano's career and Jay Butler being there as the strength and conditioning coach. They work really well together. And I mean, if you saw some photos, I mean, they look the part. There's a photo they put out of Kyle Monangai. He looks ripped. I mean, much stronger than in the past. The photo of Isaiah Eaton is crazy. He looks like the Hulk. And they didn't put out weights on the roster, so you can't compare. But just in terms of seeing some footage, it really looks like, and from things that I heard, this team is physically at a higher level, and that's huge. And I think being healthy is part of that. So I think that's sincere. Him talking about the team culture. Obviously, culture is always a buzzword and something that's easy to talk about. But I do think entering year 4, it's a critical time. I think there's a difference between building culture and thriving within the culture. And just even having Maya Nahanatu on the podcast recently, the way he spoke, the way he talked about the players really taking the lead in getting the buy-in of the rest of the team, of newcomers, of transfers, of younger guys. It really sounded the part. And Schiano kind of echoed that today. And I thought one thing that was really telling, and I think Schiano is very intentional in everything he says, but he invoked Brian Leonard as a comparison in terms of that this group and the way the players are leading. It reminds him of that group back then with Brian Leonard that we know was the catalyst for that group, not just Brian Leonard, but that class and players around him in terms of getting Rutgers over the hump into national relevancy and being such a strong program. So I don't think that was by accident. I don't think Schiano says things like that pretty lightly. So that was a huge, huge positive. And I do think that having the players hold players accountable is something that's been missing. And I'm not saying it's been missing as much in the Schiano era, but it was certainly missing when he was gone. And I think as players get better, as you get deeper, and as your accountability grows, it can yield positive results. So I think that's a big positive. And I think Schiano, like I said, referencing Leonard, that for me was really telling in a positive way. Coaching staff too, I think it's real in terms of the fact that there is real value. The defensive staff, the cohesiveness there, everyone returning a second year. The defense made real strides last year. Can they make more? Having all the defensive coaches back is huge. Absolutely huge. And then on the offensive side of the ball, all 3 new hires that Schiano made, they've all worked for him before. Pat Flaherty was with Rutgers last year as a consultant, the offensive line coach from the Giants. He goes way back with Schiano. Dave Brock coached with Schiano a long time ago. They go way back. Shiraka, we know, was at Rutgers with Schiano, over a decade ago. They go way back. So there is a certain level of hitting the ground running with this coaching staff. And Schiano referenced the spring. I think the coaching in terms of fundamentals, developmental coaching is at a really high level. Highest since Schiano's been back, for sure. And if you really go back, with the Ash era, Flood era, It's the highest it's been in a very long time. So you have what I think is a very strong culture with the players holding themselves accountable. You have a really veteran, experienced coaching staff that knows how to teach the game, that knows how to game plan. They're big positives for me. I really think those are reasons for optimism. Obviously, execution is going to be the deciding factor. Can certain players develop that they need to develop? That's huge. Can the offense be close to average? Can the defense take another step forward? Can special teams improve? I think an underrated storyline was not good last year. Gavin Wimsatt, he didn't say anything revelatory. He did talk about how he referenced Shiraka in terms of thinking like Shiraka on the field and thinking things through. I've talked about that some already this offseason, but I think the mental side, having the game slow down for Gavin and having him, I think his accuracy and his decision making can improve considerably under Shiraka simply because he's going to keep it simple and he's going to give him strategies on how to read the defense, but also make decisions. And I think that's a big plus too. I don't think it's smoke. Offensive line. So this is where I think kind of the first thing that was telling to me in terms of an obvious concern, right, is the offensive line. And, I talked about it 2 days ago when I talked about the offense and needing to develop a starting five. Schiano actually referenced needing to develop a starting five. But the key part of what he said was, I'm not sure who those five are yet. Now, he's got a month to figure it out. But ideally, right, if you're going to make real strides, or I shouldn't say make real strides, but if your offensive line is in a place where there is strength on your team, the starting five going into training camp. When you go into training camp not knowing the starting five, that's a little concerning. I don't think that means the offensive line can't make real strides under Flaherty. I think, there's some reasons to be optimistic. I've mentioned Kobe Asamoah. I'm really high on him as a guard. Holland Pierce is going to, I think, take another step forward. I think Ireland Brown is solid at center. Right tackle is a bit of an issue in terms of who's going to replace Holland Pierce over there. I think, Tyler Needham, we talked about, has a good shot, but can they stay healthy? Can they progress as a unit? Can they gel and be a cohesive starting five? I think we heard in Schiano's words that, that they're not sure. They don't know the answer. Wide receiver, he did call out Nassim Brantley and Ja'Quay Jackson pretty quickly. I do think that they have confidence that they can be the top two receivers. He then mentioned Isaiah Washington and Chris Long, and then talked about a slew of younger receivers having an opportunity. So, no mention of the slot with Dremel and Rochelle. I don't think that necessarily means anything. I do think, though, him referencing a slew of younger guys, if they think one of the true freshmen can help them, and there's a lot of speed there, there's size, they're going to get a shot between Fama Toure, Jesse Fury, Devon Fuse, Dylan Breathwaite. There's legitimate talent at the wide receiver group as freshmen. And you know what? I think there's going to be a window where if certain older guys can't figure it out, those younger guys are going to get thrown in the mix sooner rather than later. So that's obviously, we knew that was a huge question mark, that position group coming in. But I think that was telling as well. Secondary, no real surprise. Schiano's very high on the defense, very high in the secondary. I thought it was interesting. It was a good question. I didn't catch who asked it. Just talking about scheme with five defensive backs. Are they going to continue that? You have more depth at linebacker now with Moses Walker back, Motore, who could play on the edge. But, it's not just Deion Jennings and Tyreen Powell now, but you also lost Christian Izzian, Braswell, and Avery Young in the secondary. And those are three key spots that play quite a bit if you're playing five defensive backs. But Schiano was very high on the secondary. Specifically mentioned Shaquan Loyal, who I mentioned yesterday as a player I think is going to step up and have a big year. He's super, super high on him. No surprise there. Igbenuson. He also mentioned Flip Dixon. Those are going to be the top three safeties. And then you have Max Melton and Robert Longer being on the corners. You have some backups there with Kason Abrahams played a bunch. You have Amankwa who transferred in. Charles Rogers, who transferred in. So I believe Schiano when he says the secondary he thinks can be a strength. There is a lot of depth there. There's talent. There's some younger guys behind them, but I think overall that is a group that can be good. And I think the defense as a whole is in a really good place. And again, you have that staff connectivity. It's exciting. I think it's exciting. So of course there's going to be optimism and people, get cringe. And I'm getting all these messages now. Oh, 4 wins, 4 wins. Listen, I don't know what I'm going to predict for the season yet. 4-8 is certainly possible. But I do think that there's some signs of things gelling, of continuity, of veteran players taking accountability. You have mental stability with the team now. Gavin's the starter. You have guys that were key that are back healthy. There's certainly some momentum. How strong is that momentum? How much can it carry them into September? How will they handle the first strike of adversity? All valid questions, all valid concerns. Day one of training camp. Excited to cover this team. A month till opening day against Northwestern on September 3rd. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of the Scarlet Faithful. And check out the site for more coverage. And I'll be back and talk to you tomorrow.